If you give me a sport on which strength is a downside, given everything else is equal, like I'll buy you lunch or something. Don't say golf. That's a game, not a sport. If my grandpa can beat you at it, it's not a sport.
Welcome to the coachemup podcast. I'm Tim Riley. I'm joined, as always, with Zach Zillner.
Hello, everyone.
And today we got Mike motherfucking Israetel back in the house. Mike, what's up, dude?
Yes, hello, it's me, Mike motherfucking Israetel.
Is that a family name or?
Yeah.
It was changed after I had questionable relations with my mother.
Nice.
Wow.
Yes.
Excellent.
We had a good time.
Yeah.
I come from the R. Kelly school of thought. Being sexually attracted to your mom. Have you guys ever seen that interview?
With R.
I
Kelly?
try to stay away from
Oh,
any R.
yeah.
Kelly stuff.
He put that,
Oh, yeah.
maybe we'll link that below. We're not going to link that
Good
below.
luck finding it.
Yeah, it's
Don't
probably
link
been
it.
scrubbed at this point.
No, it's around.
It is?
It's awful. I wish I had not heard it.
Oh, no,
Yeah.
dude. Oh, Mike. Well, transitioning from R. Kelly into...
To the family podcast.
Yes. Mike, the last time you were on, we got into the weeds, mostly just about, S&C stuff. But we didn't really get into the weeds about your background in S&C. And everyone knows you, or I say everyone, if you don't know who Mike Israetel from his work in the space of hypertrophy, I don't know where the fuck you've been. But
Doing better things.
much less known is your experience in S&C and working with athletes. And selfishly, I just kind of want to know more about your experience there. And then we've got some topics we're going to get to, but give us Mike's background in S&C and working with athletes.
Super. So I think I'm going to include a little bit of personal sports stuff because
Hell
I think
yeah.
it's when you've played sports yourself and really tried to get better at sports, you uncover an intuitive insight about how to do that for others that's just unavailable to people that have only done it on paper.
Yeah.
That's not to say that people who have only done it on paper are totally bereft of value because there are lots of Soviet and Chinese coaches of various kinds that have never done the sport. They're brilliant. They come up with unreal insights. And also some value in a third perspective that has never been tainted by the experience of sport.
So true.
It's like a weird thing. It's like, your therapist doesn't know you or your wife at all, but it's good that she doesn't know you or your wife at all.
Yeah. Yes.
So something to be said for that. But so I probably my absolute peak glory of sport occurred when I was between the ages of about 9 and 12 years old. And at one point I was playing tennis, but as a dedicated athlete and a person whose family had no money, I only played it during summer camp and just not at all during the year. Mm-hmm. I'd have to relearn tennis. And my absolute highest accomplishment was to take rank 1 at the fake Davis Cup tournament at the Jewish Community Center. This is just levels of bad, right? No offense, Jews. We do lots of stuff great. Sports is not one of those things. And Amit Ilor, sorry, on average, some of us are ballers,
yes.
Okay? And it was the Jewish Community Center Davis Cup Class B championships because there was the kids that played tennis year round. They were good, and they split the camp into 2 brackets, but people who sucked and people
Mike, you're
who
on the
were
B
good.
side.
No, I was on the B side for sure.
Yeah.
But I won, fellas.
Let's
and I was
go.
11 or something, and it just filled me with irrational grandeur that has never gone away. I've just been chasing the dragon. So that was my kind of introduction to formal sport, and that's it. That's my experience. Okay, so
That's incredible. I wouldn't have guessed any of that.
I didn't look like this.
Yeah.
So I did. That was actually a thing that I did, tennis. And then I wrestled in high school and I started lifting weights, and I never stopped lifting weights. It's been 25 years or something. And then in college, I actually powerlifted competitively, and I started the University of Michigan Powerlifting Club, and I coached quite a bit. And so powerlifting is technically a sport, but it's a sport where lifting is the only part of the sport.
Right.
But it does get you to understand how to peak and taper, what kind of progressions to use, the value of backing off, the value of specialization, prioritization, weak points. So it was really a sport in that regard. And it got me into coaching people, which is this huge other world that if you just do things yourself, you've never coached anyone, you lack a certain just enormous part of the perspective. So I did that when I was an undergrad. And then in my master's program, I got to work with Division I athletes for the first time at Appalachian State. So I worked with, I believe it was like very occasionally field hockey, which is like a female sport, wrestling, and basketball. And I did, at the time, I didn't have a super interactive role with basketball. I helped out a little bit, but watching coaches try to teach basketball players how to squat was like, that person's torso is this long and their femur is this long.
Yeah.
So they're just like doing this good morning and their knee bend is still at like 70 degrees.
Yeah, there was no
like,
knee flexion.
Oh my, yeah, it's not really a squat, but it's really challenging. Like if you just have like a Chinese weightlifting team and you teach them to squat, they just do it perfectly the first time. You don't really know anything. You don't know how to teach people to squat. So actually at that point, I started picking up some tips about how to teach people of just not the right build for squatting, how to squat. And that comes in handy later in my career. But I also got to work with the Appalachian State football team. Hilariously, like the year I got there was the year they beat my alma mater under
Michigan. Oh my God.
Had nothing to do with that. I got there a semester later. I actually got, so I got
But they
to
were
school
still riding
then.
the
You're the
high.
reason Michigan lost, actually.
Oh yeah, sure. They lost me, even though I
Yes,
never
that's
interacted
right.
with those athletes.
Just being on campus.
I'll never
right.
forget that game. What an epic game.
Yeah. And so I worked there, and then I went to New York City to work at like upper crust rich people private personal training studio with Mr. Nick Shaw, the co-founder of RP. We did that for a year. Nick did it for a little longer. I went off to a PhD program I shall talk about in just a second. But having had worked with decent to all the way to very good powerlifters, and then having had worked with very good athletes, and I think people lose some perspective on this. D1 AA are the athletes that were all city, all region, all county, top all state.
Studs.
They were just better at every sport they've ever tried than pretty much anyone they knew. And that is a very different world of how to coach them and what to expect. And so I went up like this, and then going to that New York private personal training studio and working with, well, literally like wealthy executives. Like we trained folks that were in the C-suite at Bloomberg, like the Bloomberg.
Jesus.
So they were just like anything they walked by would turn into wads of cash.
Yes.
You know, like just
a great skill.
obscene wealth.
Yeah.
It is.
Dude,
that skill.
Yeah, that's really the skill.
Yeah.
Fuck sports.
Yeah, exactly. Can we just shift the whole podcast? Yeah.
Like what sport do you play is like money.
Yeah.
But we also, one of the guys that regularly went to our gym was a hedge fund founder who was quite old at the time, but he was a multi-billionaire. Just seeing that person in real life, I was just like, how many billionaires have you ever actually seen? He was a very gentle, very nice man. They're all super fucking cool people. But all these hedge fund managers, ultra rich people, super smart, super dedicated, super kind, and super interested in chatting with the trainer. But, and some of them quite athletic and quite responsive. But many of them, weight room, not your favorite place in the world. And a lot of these people so much excelled at academics and the thinking side that their last experience with sport performance was like in 7th grade when they got hit in the face with a volleyball and had to go to like the nurse's office. Like that was it, right? And so having to teach people how to fundamentally move, period, in a compound way was all of a sudden this profound challenge because people get spoiled training good athletes. I remember fast forward to when I was in the PhD program after this, I was teaching one of the volleyball players on the D1 team. And this is a girl who just chose to do D1 volleyball because she got a full ride for D1 volleyball at multiple schools and D1 basketball at multiple schools. She was just like, I'll do volleyball. It was like a better scholarship by a little bit or something. It was like, that good at sports.
Right.
I remember teaching her how to stiff-legged deadlift in one demonstration rep.
Yep.
And then she did it better than I've ever done it for forever. And then she was herself a coach for a bit at an NAIA school. And she texted me, she's like, bro. I was like, what? She's like, it's so hard to teach people how to lift. And I was like, yeah, bitch, you were just a gift from God.
Right.
You can't, like, when people do something wrong, but you're like, how do I explain to you how many angles off you are in every joint? You really have to, if you're going to coach people that have very little athletic talent, you have to know things.
Yep.
They don't just put it together by themselves. So that experience in New York, I include in this discussion of my experience as a strength and conditioning person, because working with some people of low talent, people usually think, oh man, like, what does a good resume look like? D1,
Yep.
pro, famous people. But in reality, you're probably learning less about how to be a better coach than when you coach like middle school kids, regular high school kids, NAIA D3 college kids, regular people. A lot of the best actual in the thick of things coaches I've ever met have a fuck ton of experience coaching people that suck and have goddamn no talent. And I don't mean this derisively. I don't have any fucking talent either. But it's just when you have talented people, you actually don't have to be as good of a coach.
Yep.
And so almost the ideal, in my view, one of the best ways to progress through a career is if you're right now listening to this and you're sitting in your little teeny office you share with 3 other departments and you're an NAIA volunteer strength and conditioning coach, and you're kind of like, fuck, like when's my big break? Learn, coach these kids up as best as you can, because you're going to come out with so many tips of how to explain things, how to vary things, how to deal with injury management. Because also, like, worse athletes just get hurt all the fucking time. Elite athletes just don't get hurt nearly as much as you would think. They kind of just put it together.
It's almost like a magical quality. Like some of the best athletes are, and we were talking about this before we started with like the Bulgarian method sort of thing. It's like there's an innate survivability that comes with some of the best athletes where they just, I've seen so many incredible athletes on paper, their careers derailed because they shred their knee twice before everybody else.
It's the robustness effect.
Yes.
You're very robust athlete.
Very robust, very resilient.
All that.
Or they get hurt and they come back really fast.
Oh yeah, they bounce back.
Like nothing is the matter with that knee. Like, which knee did you do? They're like, hey, right one. They like forgot. They're like, oh my God. So it's really, really good if you are in a position where you're not training the best. Don't you worry. It's a high probability that your time will come to coach better people. And then you get all the clout. People on campus recognize who you are. They congratulate you on the big game. That shit is coming. While it's not here for you yet, if you're listening to this or watching this, remember that you're learning more than almost everyone else at the top. So once you get to the top of the sport, you don't learn as much because everything just kind of magically happens. So I did that shit in New York. After a year, I went back to school to get my PhD in sport physiology, which, as described to me by Dr. Mike Stone, who was the head professor or the chair of the program, was the science and practice of taking good athletes and making them better. And when he told me that, I was like, fuck, am I in the right place?
Hell yeah.
How many people get to go to school for that?
Yeah.
That's fucking
And he's like,
sweet,
if you're here
Mike.
for like clinical rehab shit or adult fitness, get out. And I was like, no, I'll stay. So, because he asked, I sat down for my interview. He's like, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I was like, I want to be a sports scientist. And he was like, that's a good answer.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people are like, I want to help people recover from injury or like get like really like diligent on like their habits. And he's just like, we don't do that shit here. And that's a really important point, because I've heard lots of people say that the purpose or a major purpose of strength and conditioning is injury prevention. And both are wrong. It's a minor purpose. Now, it's a purpose and it has that effect, but it's minor. The number one reason you do strength and conditioning is to make your athletes win more, period. More points on the board. That's how you measure that shit. And Dr. Mike Stone, very curmudgeon-y old man, but like that's part of the fucking allure there.
Yeah.
He knew exactly why we were there. And so all of our education, if you learn something in class or in practice that you couldn't weave back to how does this make athletes better, you probably misunderstood something, because that's the only reason we were in school. And that's like kind of dope, you know, like, so cool. Whoa, like a very central organizing principle. Sort of thing. And then so there, we were actually put in charge of the strength and conditioning of entire teams. And I got to work with women's soccer. I got to work with baseball on occasion. I got to work with a bunch of other teams, tennis, a little bit of golf, and a ton. My major thing with my colleague, Dr. Ashley Kavanaugh, another PhD graduate from that program, we worked with women's volleyball. And we were super lucky to have a coach in Coach Lindsay Devine that she had like coached Canadian national junior team and things like that. And she's just Lindsay will hopefully find this comedic when she hears this. She's just a fucking hard bitch.
Yeah.
Like you couldn't stare her down. You couldn't intimidate her. And she ran that team like clockwork. And when Lindsay said anything, it either got done or people were crying. And
she didn't fuck around.
Not at all. And at the same time, a lot of coaches like that are like, it's my way or the highway. But Lindsay let Ashley and I in big. She was like, we want to win. How do we do that?
Hell
with
yeah.
your help. And we laid out the whole plan for her. And at first it started with, we had jurisdiction over lifting. And she would ask like, why are we doing that? Why are we doing this? Why aren't we doing this other thing? We would just calmly explain. And we didn't explain from the perspective of, well, the athletes will like this better, or well, the theory says. We always explain back to like, this is going to make the athletes better so they can win more, and here's how. And she's like, that sounds fine.
I like winning more.
Right?
Yeah.
And then at some point towards the end of our relationship together, which was about 3 years in length, we were actually able to have a huge degree of input on scheduling practices.
God, that's the
scheduling
dream.
interactive practices with strength and conditioning work, full off seasons, nutrition, all that stuff, peaking and tapering, integrating all that in. It was phenomenal. And it was really kind of a Cinderella story, because the last year that Ashley and I were there, the team won their conference.
Fuck yeah, Mike.
Which
Let's
was like,
fucking
it
go.
was so sweet too. Yeah. And we really just didn't make any grandiose promises. We said, Coach, we're gonna give you 3 things that we can do for your girls. We are going to make them be able to move a little bit faster on the court, cut back and forth faster. We are going to let them jump a little bit higher, but while they can do both of those speed and agility things, we're going to make all of them hit the ball much harder.
Hell yeah.
And I was like, what do you think? And she's like, yeah, but like, that sounds great. And we delivered. Yeah. And that's a big part of strength and conditioning to folks listening is, don't promise the sport coach the world. You're going to re-engineer any athletes. The athletes have awful athleticism or not so good. You're not going to be able to help them. You're not here to improve people's athleticism. That you probably can't coach. And there's some good scientific evidence to the fact that general athleticism is actually not a trainable quality. You either got it or you don't. And obviously it's developed through sport participation, but once someone's played basketball for 8 years, like they're going to have just about that raw athleticism, that reaction speed, that movement, that quickness, that intuitive feel for where their body is in space. Like, you're probably not coaching that up a ton, but what you can do is make the athlete's physical machinery more resilient, a little bit faster, jump a little bit higher, and be substantially stronger. And that plays a role. I remember asking Lindsay, what really is the big difference between male and female volleyball? She goes, the men are taller and they hit the ball harder. And I was like, okay, we can't get the girls taller, though I am working on a crazy contraption at home.
Let me know when you get that.
That's his,
Me too.
It's
for myself.
Him and his wife are in beta right now, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
very beta. Yes. Yeah, my wife also puts me into it every now and again. The whip comes out and then very beta. But, we can get the girls to hit harder. And it was also a really good sort of coincidence that Coach had her daughter playing on her team during that time. And her daughter was Megan Devine, physically just like gifted, but also tenacious and a hard worker.
Hell yeah.
And followed the rules.
The best.
And showed up. And I remember stopping our strength and conditioning, our lifting session once. Everyone stopped what they were doing. I was like, this is how you do a push press. And her feet would come off the ground at the top of the press because she was riding the barbell up like a pull-up. Yeah. That's how much impulse she was generating.
Let's freaking go.
Like that with like 135.
Yeah.
And when she hit the ball, it made a categorically different sound than almost everyone else. Like, boom. And I watched her hit girls in the face. They would bounce and slide back and shit. I was like, fuck yeah. Like, you line up against her, you're like, do I really want this kind of energy? Like over the fingers, all this shit. Yeah. And so we were able to illustrate like her daughter was ultra athletic, but also had a great training response. She could get more jacked. She could get more strong. She could get faster. We did all that. And when your daughter and also eventually the team captain, same person, are like the shining example of strength and conditioning applied, it's tough to be like, these coaches don't know shit. Like this is really happening. And it's really cool because Megan was so good at the sport that the other girls who might have, if the captains were all skinnies and had some kind of finesse that you can't train, but really weren't strong, you know, you play volleyball your whole life, and the people you look up to, if they just have that shit, but they don't have a ton of speed or strength or jump height, you're looking up to them for a quality that can't really be trained. And then you're really skeptical when someone's like, you need to get bigger and stronger and jump high with loaded equipment on you. They're like, but like, what's her name doesn't do that, and she's the best girl we have.
It's like, well, you're not her.
Like we can't inject her athleticism into you, though we have been injecting everyone on the team. Vaccines. Yes. So it's a lot of needles for a vaccine. A vaccine every other day.
We know how they did it.
The Bulgarian system.
Bulgarian method, right?
So yeah, it was really cool to be able to have someone who the girls were like, okay, I need to be more like her in those qualities. Yeah. And it paid off. The girls were visibly more jacked than most other teams we went up against. They jumped higher and they hit the ball harder, and they were all like they're all amazing people, and they bought in big, and they're super talented to begin with. And when you coach super talented athletes and you make them bigger, stronger, faster, it's just cool. Yeah. Because they're like, oh shit, like this is awesome. You can feel the difference. It is awesome. They could feel the difference. We could tell the difference. And at the end of the day, the thing that matters most is not how their quads look in their shorts, though it's kind of dope to be like, the hell yeah, those are our girls. Yeah. You see the other team walk out and you're like, fuck. Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
Yep. Those squats definitely don't have any knee flexion over there.
Yes. But they put points on the board. Yeah. And that's really what matters. And then after that run, I got my PhD. I worked with a bunch of different athletes in isolation solo. And then I transitioned away from working with strength athletes and started working with bodybuilders. Then I transitioned away from working with humans and just working with software. And now I sit at home alone and write like pseudocode. Yeah. So nice. Yeah. I haven't seen an athlete in years.
The evolution.
coachemup is proud to be sponsored by Plyomat. Plyomat is a jump mat that measures ground contact times, vertical jump height, and reactive strength index.
Plyomat's trusted by over 750 coaches in 25 different countries.
It's something that you can use in training day in and day out to give immediate feedback and drive output and intent.
Plyomat's always in stock. When you order your Plyomat, you can get it within 1 to 3 business days and start your training immediately.
If you get a group of athletes challenging each other to jump higher, get off the ground quicker, it transforms that workout into a highly competitive, highly potent stimulus.
If you would like access to the best jump mat on the planet, use coachemup5 to get 5% off at checkout.
Again, code coachemup5 for 5% off. Come jump with us. Get a Plyomat. Zach, guess what?
Dude, tell me.
We have partnered with Atlantis Strength. Atlantis Strength is by far the best machine equipment I have ever used. From high school, collegiate, and pro athletes, machines are underutilized. What Atlantis has done in terms of the build quality and reliability of these machines has made it effortless for me to be able to transition athletes where their output and intents can be as high as possible. You can learn more about Atlantis Strength on their website and their Instagram page. Type in Atlantis Strength. I'm such a huge fan and we're incredibly grateful. You mentioned the fact that a lot of S&C coaches are placed with the responsibility of preventing injury. Mm-hmm. And this is a tough one because like...
I hate that. I like reduction. You can't prevent injuries.
Right.
Facts. Like so very important to state. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that, your opinion on that, and then like maybe where some of the philosophical roadblocks are there actually when it comes to like why the impact that a strength coach actually has over injury?
Yeah. So strength and conditioning on average, making athletes stronger and more muscular and able to handle high power outputs absolutely reduces injury probability. Mm-hmm. But it does so by a moderate to small margin, not an enormous margin. Probably the biggest factor that makes it a moderate to small margin is the following. When you have a car that you're driving, let's say in a demolition derby, and it has, there are other cars around trying to hit you. They have teeny tiny engines and wheels with very little traction. You have like the V12, whatever the hell, with like the thickest tires ever that have knurling in it and everything. And so you'll be able to dodge out of the way of them quite easily and never get hit. Amazing. Your injury probability, having done strength and conditioning, which is bigger engine, bigger tires, is now lower. But in real sport, you don't just do enough to reduce your injury. You have this new machine you're working with. And in order to put more points on the board and cut times off races, you're going to push that machine really hard and really far. Now let's answer a different question. What is more likely to blow up and kill you, a go-kart or the top fuel dragster? Top fuel dragsters hurt themselves. As 0 to 150 miles an hour in a second or whatever the crazy ass. I remember one of my colleagues, Dr. Derek Wilcox, who would be super, super awesome for your guys' podcast, by the way. He trained some of the best people in drag racing as a strength and conditioning coach. And he said, typically the lifetime of a dragster like racer is measured in when their retinas fall back into their eye from the acceleration and they just can't see as well anymore for the sport. I'm like, what? Like, you think your athletes are pushing it to the limit. They don't have a 3,000 horsepower machine to
like
push
literal
them, like,
G-forces
like
shoving your retinas back.
100%. Like, it's just total nonsense. So, the real reason that strength and conditioning and getting athletes bigger, faster, stronger doesn't reduce injury as much as we would love to believe is because now that you're bigger, faster, stronger, you can generate higher forces, velocities, and jump heights. All three of those independently and especially together increase your probability of injury. If you saw...
and in shorter time frames.
Oh, yeah. If you saw a gymnast that could jump up 1 foot in the air and land, be like, what's the probability he's going to get hurt? You're like, I don't know. Who gets hurt off of a foot, right? If you get a gymnast to jump 4 feet in the air and land, that motherfucker lands wrong, bro. Everything's breaking. And so, like, that's why I think statistically the most injurious sport in the United States is competitive cheerleading. Because they can't jump that high themselves. They have to get like
launched.
And like
they're literally being launched higher than physiologically possible.
Yes, absolutely. That's exactly what's going on. And then they get hurt more often and the injuries are way more gnarly because like it's just going to be a thing. So if you are playing sport at your best level, getting bigger, faster, stronger is going to be a thing that in many cases prevents injury because other athletes can't fuck you up as bad because you're fucking, you know, how do you hurt someone that's super jacked? I don't know, fuck that. But you may be able to hurt yourself more just by getting into really stratospheric powers and forces and direction change speeds, and that's going to snap your shit up. On average, it's still helpful, but it's not like this panacea.
Right.
And if you promise coaches like we're gonna really cut the injury rates, I hope your guys stay weak because that's how they're going to not get hurt. But if they get really strong, really fast, they're going to get better at their sport and their injury risk is going to go down. But it's going to go down by a moderate amount, whereas they're going to get better at their sport by a very, very noticeable amount. That's probably the most relevant conversation I'm familiar with as to why promising that injury risk is the thing. There's also another problem. Injury is stochastic, which means it's not very predictable. It happens sort of to us seemingly. We don't have AI brains at random. And one of the most eloquent things I've ever heard in my strength and conditioning practice and my sort of wisdom absorption is Dr. Mike Stone, the head of my PhD program, one of America's best ever sports scientists. I asked him, listen, is it fatigue, accumulated fatigue, that correlates with most of the injuries that you've seen? And he goes, Mike, you know, that's a really good question. To be honest, I've seen people get hurt at every single phase of training. And he goes, a lot of the time I've seen the worst injuries when people are low fatigue, high fitness, which means high preparedness. That's when they're strong enough to hurt themselves the most. Like, if you think about it, you walk into a gym and it's all like old ladies lifting. Let's say they're incline benching or flat benching with barbells. How many full pec avulsions do you see? I mean, zero ever, maybe? They're just not strong enough. But like you see a guy warming up and now he's got 5 plates on the incline. You're like, I don't like to watch heavy flat barbell or incline presses because I'm like, I don't
want to see it. No, thank you.
Because they're strong enough to hurt themselves.
Yeah.
And so that's that principle illustrated again. And why what we can tell coaches is this: the worst case I have for you, coach, is I'm going to make your athletes better at their sport without increasing their injury probability. But there's a very good chance we can somewhat reduce it as well. But if you say, look, I'm here to make sure your athletes don't get hurt, the stochastic part comes in where if you can manage fatigue well as a good strength and conditioning coach, you're probably going to reduce injury risk on average. But then also your athletes are going to be more prepared more often, stronger, faster. They're going to be able to hurt themselves more. That means that the observation the coach makes is you promised me you're going to reduce injury.
Yep.
But 2 of my top 3 best guys got hurt under your watch. The fuck are you doing? And you can't promise individual results like that. You might have a situation where you can bring down the injury risk of your athletes under your tutelage by a relative risk of 10%. 10% is a big deal.
It's big.
But it could be one of those years. You guys have been in the industry long
Oh my
enough.
God, yeah.
When it rains, it pours.
All it takes, bro, 5 of your guys get like majorly hurt. And the season's like your team still shows up, but everyone knows you're not doing shit.
Yep.
And it takes 2 years to rebuild. That can just happen. Whereas sport performance improvement is much more linear of a process. I get your guys bigger, I get them quicker, I get them to jump higher, and all of a sudden, they're just straight up better. Because how can you not be? But with injury risk, because it's so stochastic, you just can't guarantee this shit is going to work out. And so that's why it's probably not the best idea for people first foot forward to be like, hey, like I'm going to reduce injury risk. Now, there's another little thing here. There is an injury risk introduced with hardcore, heavy, and powerful lifting. Independently. People can get hurt in the gym. Cannot lie to coaches about this.
Well, so that's another thing too, where it's like, I think the strength coach, the typical strength coach or trainer even, it's like, there's like a willingly, like almost like a belligerent denial that like, that actually is a thing. Like there is a chance you're going to get hurt doing this.
Yes. Now lifting is categorically safer than every sport, but for like golf, maybe.
Right.
It's just safer than almost every sport. So if the coach is like, ooh, I don't know, they're incorrect in the sense that they're wildly misperceiving the risk. Because when you see a lot of weight on the bar as a coach and maybe you don't lift yourself, you're like, dude, you're going to break my boys. Like, what the hell are you doing? 3 plates. What the fuck? Now, you don't understand that lifting is way more controlled. And with higher force, slower velocity lifting, the injury probability is just categorically lower than just like stepping onto a basketball court. As soon as you jump up, you might land wrong. And then you
might land on someone's foot.
100%.
Yep.
So that's something to keep in mind. But as a matter of additive injury risk, if you forget the fact that training makes you more resilient, as far as getting more acute exposures to risk, if you just do sports versus sports plus S&C, the acute risk in any one given session, in any one given week of training is absolutely higher if you go and lift hard. Lifting hard also fatigues athletes, makes them less athletic temporarily, less flow state, less coordination of gross motor patterns, and that can get you hurt. And the good news, it also slows you down, so that counterbalances a little bit. Because you're not fast enough to get hurt, but you're wobbly and you might get hurt. So there's a lot there in the mix. It is definitely another thing. It's like, imagine you own like a Formula One team and you see the guys doing like racing on the test track or whatever. You're like, is there a chance they'll crash my cars? Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Now it's a much more controlled environment. You don't have 50 other cars trying to push you out. So it's much lower.
Yeah.
And if we don't do it on the test track, there's a way higher chance they're going to get hurt on a real track.
Yeah.
So, but it's just a matter of calculated risk. Short-term higher risk for long-term somewhat lower risk, but not. Remember, again, back to the general principle, we're here to make athletes better at their sport. And if we find a way that like inoculates athletes from injury, well, your boy's taking that pill day one.
Absolutely.
So back to that principle of, what is the purpose of strength and conditioning actually? And that father principle being kind of what you spoke about with Dr. Stone. It's like, we're here to take good athletes and make them better athletes.
Yes.
It's seen frequently, most popularly on social media, where coaches, trainers will try and blend what's happening in the weight room or maybe on the track in an effort to improve very specific physical qualities.
Yes.
And then some things that you might see on the practice field that might improve technical or skill
Yes.
of the sport.
Yes.
And then someone says to themselves, I'm just going to put them together.
Yes. Brilliant.
And
Ball heavier.
yes, right.
Basketball with a 10-pound ball.
Yes,
That's not going to affect technique at all.
not at
Which
all.
that is a thing.
Yeah.
No. I've
So
been around a long time. It's awful.
it's difficult because, and I'm going to play devil's advocate for the strength coach.
Yes,
There are times where maybe head coach comes to you and says, I need things that look more like what's happening on the court. And you try and educate and you say, it's like, well, hey, coach, actually, like what we're trying to do is all the things that we just discussed, bigger, stronger, faster, more able to express themselves more freely as an athlete. Yes. And then as a byproduct, the skill that they're learning over here, they're going to be able to more easily or more proficiently express those things.
Yes.
Or at a higher level.
Yes.
And the coach says, no, fuck that. Get the 10-pound basketballs. We're practicing with that today.
Yeah.
So I'll say all that to say, is there a time and place for, sports specific training? Or actually, let me back up. Define sports specific training.
Sure.
Define that, your definition of that.
Yeah. Oh boy, here comes the brainy shit. So technically speaking, anything you do with the reasonable and correct expectation that it makes you better at sport is to some degree sport specific training. Mm-hmm. But sport specific training goes all the way from live scrimmages that are trying to replicate the qualities of the game almost identically. That's as specific as it gets. It would be, imagine your team is going to be playing at Madison Square Garden. Let's say you're doing basketball. Probably some of the best training they could get is to have, let's say there's like 12 people on your basketball team. You mix the guys up 5-on-5 the night before the big game in Madison Square Garden. You play basketball live in Madison Square Garden in the same arena. Get used to the lights. Obviously the fans won't be there. That's another big thing. But there's no better training than actually competition. That's the best training ever because it is the most specific, best in the sense of specificity.
Right.
But there is a spectrum of specific to general. All of that training is still for the sport. Not all of it is going to be exactly specific. Mm-hmm. So when you have, let's say, a race car, you're working on a lot of turns and not a ton of straightaway work. That's specific, but less so because it's not the whole race. You've broken the race up into different components and now you're training this, training this, training that. So we have to look at sport training of what is all the stuff that we have to do? All of that is sport training in some capacity, including strength and conditioning. So what we really have to do is really clear the table theoretically and go, what makes for good sport training, period? And there is an answer to this. Good sport training is something that trains your limiting factors in sport performance to the degree that it makes you better at that sport than other priorities of training you could have chosen. You give me some God's gifted all-time best free throw shooter. Just like he just can't fucking miss 95% off the line. And the thing is his ball handling skills and his passing and his teamwork abilities, just like he's NBA, right? But they're like D2, average, maybe. If you spend a lot of time with him on his free throws for anything other than maintenance, you're a fucking idiot. Because the limiting factor to his ability to be good at sports, his sport, is the fact that he can't handle the fucking ball.
Yeah.
He can't even pass the ball really well. So like the team that's going up against him be like, dude, this guy never misses. Be like, don't worry, put Johnson on. And be like, but Johnson can't even. Johnson,
dribble.
just get on him and do this.
Yeah.
He's done. He's going to try to pass. It's going to be the slowest thing in the world. Just take the ball, pass it up court, and we're just going to get a dunk.
Yeah. Also, good news, he's slow as fuck. So he's not going to hawk you down.
And he's going to try to dribble, and you're just going to take it from him again. It's like, that's not a complete basketball player.
Yeah.
So really the best way to train at sport is to train the limiting factors that have the biggest carryover to sport performance, which means training is going to change and evolve over time. And it's also true to say that there are many limiting factors, and they kind of one becomes the other, becomes the other, becomes the other. And so they've kind of do this, and you have to kind of attend to a lot of things that could become limiting factors. You also have to think ahead. Yeah, sure, their strength not a limiting factor this season, but in 3 seasons, I want them stronger. So when their skills upgrade, I don't want this to be the limiting factor later, because some kind of training, you don't see the benefits right away. I mean, you can imagine doing a weights workout and being like, hell yeah, I'm stronger. Like, no, you're actually weaker right now. You'll be weak for 48 to 72 hours. And then you'll be a little, 0.5% stronger. They're like, why the hell did I just do 2 hours of training? You're like, 3 years down the line, you're going to thank me.
Yeah.
So that's sport performance. So the best way to figure out what to do in sport training, and more specifically in strength and conditioning for the purposes of this discussion, is to ask the question of, what are important sport qualities that are limiting factors in sport performance? Because you can have multiple limiting factors at the same time. If you increase one of them, everything else goes up. Like if you're a wrestler, nothing changes except you get faster, you get better. If nothing changes and you get stronger, you also get better. If nothing changes and you get more technical, you also get better. And so in that case, training all 3 of those at some point or another is a good idea. But it used to be training for sport was you just played the sport.
Yeah.
The term off season means you don't do anything. Like, I know it sounds crazy, but in the 1920s and 30s, professional baseball players, in the United States, and baseball was on a psychotic game back then, and people would like crazy fandom. Thousands and thousands of people psychotic about baseball. It's America's pastime, right? Which is like just totally not true today. Baseball's dope, but like, how many people really like fucking love it?
I'm not watching
Football's
that.
probably right.
Yeah.
What are they going to do? There's a lot of breaks in the action here.
In the World Series.
I don't.
Right. Oh, dude, I was in I was in an elevator yesterday coming up to my hotel room, and this guy gets in, and we're sitting there, and he's like, oh, the Yankees just scored or whatever. And I was like, oh. And he because like I look like a sports person.
Yeah.
And he just totally assumed I would know what the fuck's going on. And I was like, oh, are they playing? He's like, it's the World Series. I'm like, oh, neat. Who are they playing? And he's like, the Dodgers. And I was like, oh, that's swell. You know, and I hope both teams have fun. Okay, I didn't say that. I just shut the fuck up.
Right.
And you could tell he was palpably like, this idiot.
I didn't share in my joy whatsoever.
Yeah. He was very excited about his telephone.
Yeah.
And so it used to be that the off season meant the guys, like real professional baseball players, would like go door to door and sell refrigerators.
Like
they would sell insurance. Yeah. And can you imagine, like, it's a lot easier to sell a refrigerator when you're a fucking Babe Ruth.
Yeah.
You know,
Literally.
Yeah. He's like, I'm selling a fridge. Like, honey, do we need a fridge? She's like, nope.
That's
like, yes,
That's Stinky Johnson trying to sell us that refrigerator or whatever their names were back then.
So they were so good. Like insanely racially inappropriate names. I love it. I'm there for it. So in any case, it used to be just, you didn't even just train your sport. You did only just played your sport. That was training. And you didn't even do it for a full year round. You didn't have an integrated annual plan. You just like fucked off after the season, and the guy was just do fuck all and then come back, and they would retrain basically just by having games. Then it got to the point where there was an on-season, off-season, but at least there was some kind of training involved, as well as gameplay. Then eventually it was kind of a year-round situation, but most of the training was very related to the sport or just practicing the sport itself. You played soccer, you practiced soccer by playing soccer games. Maybe it was short-sided games, maybe it was full-sided games, but it was just soccer play, not a whole lot of fundamentals and breakdowns and drills. And then eventually sport training itself became more complicated, where when you show up, you don't just play your sport, you do drills, you do all sorts of maneuvers, different position players do different things. The evolution of sport training continues. And then eventually somebody realized, like, you know, and this is the big realization. I don't know if it was couched this way, but this is the theoretical reason why it bubbled up to the surface. There are qualities that make us better at sports as athletes that are not sufficiently trained to their capacity, beyond which training them more would make you worse, in actual sport practice. But the qualities they get if they train them somewhere else can spill over into making you better at sport. For example, if you are a wrestler and you're wrestling properly, you're good. You don't very often in any practice really use a lot of brute strength and peak power, because that means you're really like ultra tired, in which you also don't use peak strength and power because you're too tired.
Yeah, right.
So actually that goes away. At least you get close to failure muscularly. But it really just means you're either shitting your technique away, which is bad, or you have someone in practice that can really push you absolutely to your limits in that specific way. But so in wrestling and good wrestling practice, same for jiu-jitsu, same for judo, same for all the combat sports, you don't get an opportunity many times to really put a ton of force or a ton of maximum power into your shit. Because if you have to do that, you're not playing the technical game correctly and you're doing it wrong. However, so what does that mean? That means you don't ever get your strongest or your most powerful just training wrestling. And folks figured out that if you work on strength and power somewhere the fuck else, but you come back to wrestle, you're better at wrestling, because now every movement is, relatively speaking, easier for you. And if someone's really pushing you, you can fucking lat drop them into the moon because you're just fucking jacked and powerful and strong. You guys remember, Krellin, the Russian wrestler dude who like didn't lost for forever?
Yeah. Freak.
Like, you look at his body and you're like, okay, muscles must matter for this. And he would like, oh my God, he would like gut wrench people like from the ground into the sky, and they were like, why would you lift weights, right? No, right? He was ultra strong and so on and so forth. The thing is, you can't just get that from wrestling. So now we have that new wave of advancement of sport training, which includes the birth of formal strength and conditioning, which is, again, to define it very precisely, is to train sport qualities that will improve your ability to play the sport that are not sufficiently trained enough to get their best adaptive output in the sport training itself. Basketball players, how often are they jumping to maximum height? In the tip-off, maybe?
Yeah, rarely.
And there, even that's not so maximal, because if you just focus on maximal, you're like, oh, the ball's over there.
Yeah.
So you're really just jumping to the ball, and that's pretty close to maximal, but it's not like when you're dunking, your number one idea is to get high enough to do the technical dunk you want to do. It's not like I'm just going to jump as high as humanly possible and kind of dunk on the way down or something. You jump up hitting your head on the rim or some shit.
Right.
Used to happen to me all the time.
It's a big problem. Me too, bro. I actually jumped head first into the fucking, they got to cut me out of the net and everything. It was embarrassing. It was embarrassing. Yeah. How'd you get up there? They asked. And I was like, you want to see that shit again? I hurt my ankle. I can't do it.
Yeah.
So strength and conditioning, because we know that's the parameter we're working with, that's the mission, it becomes much easier to figure out what's a good idea and what's not a good idea to do. Because strength and conditioning, always and everywhere, addresses the qualities that make you better at sport, but are not sufficiently well trained in the sport itself. So to answer your question in a very fucking roundabout way of what if the coach asks you to like do more basketball looking shit in the gym, the best answer to that is, coach, don't they do enough basketball looking shit under your tutelage? Also, I don't know basketball enough to correct their technique appropriately. That's your job, motherfucker. I don't know if we give them 10-pound basketballs and have them do free throws. I don't know. I think a free throw looks like this, or you fucking do it with both hands. That's wrong. Apparently it's just one. Well, what would I know about that? And even if your strength and conditioning coach is a very good basketball player, there are sport coaches that do that job.
Yeah.
That's what they do in a basketball court. I know it sounds strange, but all of the basketball specific techniques and skills you could train are best trained on the basketball court. And it's not that if you trained them in the weight room, it would necessarily make you worse, but that's just extending the timeline of basketball practice in a place in which it's not great. It's like this. You're doing practicing shots for wrestling. And then you go out in the street to do like some kind of like a little street lifting workout, but you want the guys to put a barbell on their back and then do shots. Right. You're like, coach, they're going to scrape their knees to shit. Yeah. We're on concrete. Are you out of your fucking mind? Like,
and he's like, yes.
You like, full knee to the ground, step through shots. Like, he's not going to say yes. He's going to be like, well, no. So if you want to train basketball things, basketball techniques, basketball positions, basketball skills, the weight room isn't a place where it's just insanely inappropriate. It's just a real B or C or D grade version, go to the court. It's like if you want to really get to know a girl, but you're at a dance club and you're like, what's your name? And she's like, Cynthia. You're like, what? She's like, never mind. Nobody's learning shit. Right? You're out. She's like, it doesn't matter.
Typical nightclub experience, actually.
Yeah. The good news is she could be like, it doesn't matter what my name is. Let's get it poppin'. Or she's like, it doesn't matter because go fuck yourself.
That's probably what it is.
Right. You don't have to leave, but at least leave me alone.
Right.
You don't hear that either, though, so no worries. You're still around. It's just so it's not to say like skills work somehow infects the strength and conditioning realm and it's really bad. There is a little bit of that we could talk about like transfer of skills and kind of the poisoning effect there. That's a minor problem. It's just a coach, you want basketball, bro, that's you. Why don't you just schedule more hours with the guys in the court? And they're, well, they've had enough court time. Okay. So now we forget about basketball and we go, these athletes are mechanical machines. And basketball trains their machinery, their anatomy, their physiology to a very great extent, which is just why playing street ball is going to get you a physique and it's going to get you an ability and it's going to be you're going to be great. But you're not getting enough exposure, whether in absolute load, absolute jump height, or in a variety of other effects, or in number of exposures to really fill up your cup of enough muscle hypertrophy, muscle strength, and power abilities that we can do in the weight room. That's what the strength and conditioning weight room and turf is for developing size, strength, and speed qualities. That's what we're there to do. That's what all the toys are for. And say, listen, your basketball training and coaching, that's all super great. You're not going to forget your basketball skills by lifting weights, but we're going to re-architect your body and your nervous system here in a very general way that makes you, when you come back to the court, day in, day out, month in, month out, you're going to have a new body. It's like if we were all cyborgs, it's like getting an upgrade to how strong your elbow flexion is. Like there's all a new machine. Like, are you going to be better at beating up like cyberpunk criminals or whatever? Yes. Now, are you actually, can you imagine like laying on an operating table and you have two bionic arms and they're replacing them with like the new 3.0 version. And you're like, so this is going to make me better at beating up criminals. They're like, yeah. Like, well, why aren't I beating them up right now? Like, because we're replacing your arms, you dumb asshole. You want to try it?
We're like not done yet, dude.
Fucking idiot. It's you're changing the machine, and then the machine goes with its new cybernetic arms to go train to beat up criminals in the simulated dojo, whatever. So basketball players, volleyball players, football players, the sport shit they have handled. That's the best argument against bringing it into the weight room, isn't there? Like, fucking bring this shit into the weight room, bro. It's like, you fellas want to do more sport practice. That's what the fuck the volleyball court's for. When you come to me, I don't need you for hours and hours a week. I don't need you for that long. And I don't need you for anything super complicated. I just want to upgrade your basic physical machinery. Some people are just better at sports. Just straight up. And you ask why. Now, a lot of it's like neural wiring. They're just quicker and all this other stuff. Like that seems to not be so trainable. It's a little trainable, but not a ton. But a lot of times they're just bigger and leaner and more powerful. They jump higher. You take that, you put it into any sport, they fuck shit up. Like a lot of MMA guys will do this thing after they win their match. They just do like a full backflip. Like how many people in the street can do right? And you're like, hey man, like easily after a fucking 10 minutes of beating the shit out of each other. And it's like, okay, like you might be quick with your hands. You might have done golden gloves or whatever the fuck. But if you're like 50 pounds overweight and you're not strong in lower or upper body, there's a level of physicality that an MMA fighter is going to bring to you, which you're going to find very unfortunate. And then you're going to ask yourself, what am I missing? Let's say you have the same genetics for quickness and agility and athleticism, and you have the same amount of time spent like throwing punches and ducking and shit like that, but your body is insufficiently fucking cyborged out in order to fuck with that shit. And what do you need to do? Yeah, going on the mats, going in the cage, awesome. Putting on pads, great. But you're already doing all that stuff. That's no longer your biggest limiting factor. You just don't look like you're in MMA shape. Because you're not. And now it's time to hammer and chisel your shit so that you become some combination of bigger and stronger and faster / more powerful, probably in that order to some extent. First, we build you some muscle. Getting strong with what muscle you have is dope, but if you muscle size is the most important thing about strength. It's obvious when you're in a gym. and you get you a little bit bigger. That's contextual based on what your body weight ideal is for your sport. We're not going to turn basketball players into 350-pound monsters. Well, Shaquille O'Neal did fuck shit up back in the day.
He was pretty good at basketball.
And people are like, oh man, he's too big. Like, okay, he's going to post up here, go through him. Like, I don't want to die. They can also just like ball hogging in the fucking rebound. Like, he's going to get in your way. You just deal with the shit. So in any case, outside of just getting too big or whatever, getting a bigger muscle, then once you have a bigger muscle, getting that muscle stronger, mostly through the nervous system, connective tissues, muscle architecture, and then taking that strong muscle and reteaching it how to move as fast as it ever did. And then you have more strength multiplied by similar velocity. You have more power.
Yeah.
And so if anything is resisting you, you move through it easy, which is like when you see like O-lineman hit someone on the football field, you're like, is that guy dead? Because their reduction in velocity was very low when they entered into someone else's face. Because if someone hits you and their velocity reduction is instant, they just bounce off of you. But if it's almost nothing, like a freight train, it just keeps going the same speed. That's what you want. That really is what we do in the strength and conditioning realm. And on the one hand, it's kind of shitty because it's so fucking simple. But on the other hand, it's so beautiful and it's so really uncomplicated because it is so simple. Now, there are other limiting factors to sport you can work on in the weight room. Mobility can be one of them, but mobility is strength multiplied by flexibility. So really flexibility can be one of them. Sometimes they don't get enough flexibility exposure in their sport, but it is a limiting factor in those instances in which they are put in those positions. You can definitely train flexibility in the weight room, and there are times and places for that. It's not the most common thing you train your athletes in, but it is a thing. Can you train top end speed in the weight room? No. Can you train acceleration in the first couple of like lateral or front and back sprints? Yes. Is it a huge difference? No. One of the things about speed is muscle shortening velocity and total limb velocity has a much higher heritability than size and strength. And so if you got that shit, you're just quick, you're just going to be quick. And if you're just slow, you probably won't ever be the fastest person. It can be altered, but not a ton. So if you spend a ton of time on just really hammering in velocity movements and power movements, but you haven't worked on hypertrophy and strength much, you're going to improve the athletes for sure, but it might just not always be the best use of your time. So what can you really change the most in the weight room? Slash is also a limiting factor, always and everywhere strength, sometimes, often, but to some varying degrees muscle size, and power. To a smaller degree than strength, but strength itself coming up raises power 80 or 90% of the way to where you need it. Sprinkle in a bit of speed work, jump height type of stuff, and you have something like 90% of what you could ever do as a strength and conditioning coach to an athlete. Magical balancing drills, movement pattern drills, becoming more aware of your knees. Motherfucker, that guy plays D1 basketball. He's as aware of his joints as you'll never be. That's not the limiting factor. It is by no means clear we can even train it. Now, if new research comes out to show we can actually deeply train core integrated movement ability and proprioception, athleticism, in the weight room, man, I'll be the first person to sing that praise.
Sure.
But it's just not likely at this point. So strength and conditioning has this really interesting thing of they have kind of a large degree of control over a small domain. Another thing is this, and this is, I want to be very clear about this. I was actually having a conversation with a colleague of mine who also graduated from the same ETSU sports science program, Christian Carter. Where is he at? James Madison, I think. He's a head strength and conditioning coach there. He's I love the guy to death. He's a fucking amazing, cynical asshole, like George Carlin type of shit. Nice. Times 100. It's fucking awesome. But he's of the opinion, which I tend to agree with, that a lot of strength and conditioning coaches overvalue how much of an impact they can make on the athlete's performance. Junior high, high school, early college, 1 and 0, infinite amount of ability you can make someone better. College, pro, it's not a big effect. So strength and conditioning coaches would be really well served, in my opinion, to stop thinking that they have this like incredible ability to re-architect athletes from the ground up. Because athletes will come to you and they'll be like, how do I completely transform my game? You're like, motherfucker, you're in the wrong place. And they're like, where should I be? Like the genetic engineering center.
Right. Yeah. Like talk to your
Mom
parents.
and dad.
Yeah.
Like, what sport did your dad play? They're like, accounting? You're like, yes.
Wrong sport.
Yeah, wrong sport. Very important sport, but wrong. So it's kind of a good thing and a bad thing. It's a bad thing because as a strength and conditioning professional, especially at a higher level, you don't have a humongous impact on how well your athletes do in sport, how many points they put on the board. However, you do have an impact that is notable and significant and important.
Yeah.
Because the higher the competition level gets, the more little things matter. I mean, you might be a stud, but until you get top 8 in the world and 100-meter sprint, you line up, you're like, oh shit, everyone's got long femurs. Everyone has really super long calf tendons and tiny calves. Everyone's jacked and lean. Am I really doing everything I can be doing to separate myself? So strength and conditioning matters for sure, but it doesn't matter a ton. And that's in a sense a little depressing. However, it's also really good because you have this little world that's yours, the weight room, the strength and conditioning side. And also, not only is it that, okay, you don't have a huge impact, but you got something. But it's also what you're doing in there is profoundly simple. It doesn't mean the application of it's always going to be simple because you're like squat and they'll do some weird question mark bullshit. And you're like, okay, I teach this athlete for maybe months or years how to do a squat. That stuff is not simple at all. The psychology of motivation, back and forth, fatigue management, nothing is simple there. But the end goal, the end state, very simple. To some extent bigger, depending on the sport, stronger, not really depending on the sport. If you give me a sport on which strength is a downside, given everything else is equal, like I'll buy you lunch or something. Don't say golf. That's a game, not a sport. If my grandpa can beat you at it, it's not a sport. I'm kidding, Tiger Woods. I'm kidding, Tiger. Don't take a bunch of drugs and have sex with me and then crash your car. Dude, when I found out Tiger Woods was banging like 18 porn stars, I was like, why am I not a billionaire athlete? The fuck? Texting the porn stars, they never reply to me.
Big shout out to TikTok. I was on TikTok the other day. And it turns out he was hooking up with his next door neighbor's 21-year-old daughter. That's why his wife pulled out the golf clubs.
Personal.
Yeah. Zach, you know what my favorite clothing brand is?
Tell me.
It's Legends. I've been wearing it for a long time. From training to lifestyle, Legends has got you covered.
So what kind of gear does Legends have?
You can get shirts, shorts, underwear, socks, tops and bottoms, hoodies, hats, sweats. They've got it all. And they just dropped an entire women's line.
Holy smokes.
I know.
Tim, the great thing about these tees, I found I'm 20% stronger rocking them when I train.
Speaking of 20%, that's how much you save when you go to legends.com and enter in promo code coachemup or click the link below.
Tim, do you take supplements?
As a matter of fact, I do.
What brand do you take?
Legion. Legion has everything you want in supplements and nothing that you don't. So no artificial dyes, sweeteners. It's 100% real, from a whey isolate all the way to their non-stem pre-workout, which I absolutely love. Get the peach flavor. You'll thank me later. There's absolutely no filler. The only things that you're getting are the clinically effective dosages. Use code coachemup for 20% off your first order. You're going to get loyalty points, which is going to reduce the price every time you buy. Go hit up Legion today, code coachemup.
Was it Dave Chappelle did like an awesome thing about Tiger Woods? People are like, people judge Tiger Woods for getting it. Be like, motherfucker, you couldn't get it if you tried. He just opens his phone. The world wants to have sex with him. Famous billionaire pro athlete. It's tough in these streets, fellas. Everyone's coming at you.
Funny thing on that too.
I haven't seen this.
Same kind of
same idea.
Yeah.
So basically, get your folks bigger to some extent. Get them stronger to a high extent. Once you've laid that foundation, every time you recycle your program, be it weeks or months through modern periodization, make them more powerful. Take that strong muscle and move it rapidly against a lower resistance. And occasionally, depending on the sport, phases of a little bit of speed work and jump height work. Usually the sport handles that actually just fine, but sometimes you need a little bit more of that. The thing is power, which is taking moderately heavy things and moving them incredibly fast, transfers so well to speed. You don't really need to train speed much by itself. Like if someone can put on a 20-pound vest and do a set of 3 maximum jump height, their marginal utility for doing an unloaded jump is just very small. If you do a correlation coefficient of how high you jump with a 20-pound vest versus how high you jump unloaded, it's going to be like 0.95 or 0.98. You're Gucci. And also it gives them extra muscular stimulus to preserve that strength as well. So size, strength, power/speed in basic movements of the body that are addressing limiting characteristics in their sport. So for basketball, overall upper body ability, pushing and pulling, plus lower body vertical force. That's really all the thing that limits you in basketball. You just address those ultra simple qualities over and over, in a sense, thanklessly, in a sense, in a way that could be fun with variation and fun with interaction with athletes, but kind of boring. It's a thankless job, S&C, because you don't have a huge effect on sport performance, though notable. You have your own little world, but you do your very simple job so fucking well that the folks actually coaching the athletes don't have anything to worry about, because they know one really important thing. Their athletes, their machines arrive to them ready to fuck shit up. And they don't have to worry about the body. They just have to worry about, you run here, you take the pass here, you make the shot. But I'm not worried about you not having enough fucking arm strength. So when you're tired later in the game, your basketball isn't going into hoop because you're tired.
Right.
If your 1RM shoulder press is high enough, right, you won't have. You ever see middle school basketball? They like have real trouble putting the ball high enough. You don't want that sort of thing. Or you get in the box
every week.
I do. My daughter, it's a rough watch. They're
trying.
Yeah, she's good.
Yes.
But man, yikes.
Yeah. So, basketball, you get in the box, you got to push your way around. Getting rebounds, you got to push your way around, just general upper body ability. Here's the thing also. Most sports are so complex, they require a 360-degree muscle strength power. So you just train the body in the basic pushing, pulling movements, posterior chain, anterior chain, stiff-legged deadlift squats, that sort of thing. You're really starting to get to that 90+% of this is all your best work that you can do. When Formula One drivers, when they get into their car, they expect that the mechanics and the engineers have given them the best vehicle to drive in. Your job as a strength and conditioning coach is be the best mechanic and engineer you can. And you'll notice, because of the regulations in motorsport, as a mechanic and engineer, you're very much like a strength and conditioning coach, because you can't just put like a V14 engine in there because it's illegal. Like it's topped out at V6. Sorry. Like it's just the rules. But you do have an ability to fine tune. And because people's genetics are limited, you can't just make them 3 times bigger. Can you imagine S&C Unlimited would be like, make them taller? Just like cyborg shit. Like, yeah, then you really are the most important thing. And the sport coach can take a fucking seat. Like, don't worry, this guy can dunk from half court. Like, I don't even know I'm training anyone. 100%. Just taking it. But you have to give the coach that race car that the Formula driver sits in and goes, the car's not my limiting factor. It's time for me to perform. You want to give the basketball, the volleyball, the football, the wrestling coach back his athletes week in and week out. And that coach knows, okay, their bodies are sorted. Now I can pour skills, tactics, and strategy into them. And that is all of sport performance.
Yeah.
Ta-da. God, it's depressing.
We talked about
does that make any sense, or does it just like?
No, I think that was good. I think kind of piggyback off that, like exercise selection we were talking about before. Some people, they just want a black and white answer of like what exercise is best. When you program for athletes, what's your thought process when choosing, let's say, a lower body strength exercise?
Sure. Yeah. I want an exercise that can challenge the athlete through their either full or relevant range of motion. For most sport athletes, I prefer a full range of motion that the muscle can exert high forces in, because you want to bulletproof the athletes from having to get into ranges of motion that they're not used to. And they're like, oh shit, I've never like actually gotten strong in this. But there's nuance there. Like peaking athletes in the in-season quarter squats, half squats are totally fine. They have an excellent place in training. Generally, good degree of range of motion. I want something that's relatively stable. You say, why? Sport occurs in an unstable circumstance. Very true. But your ability to increase strength is very, very low in an unstable circumstance because your body auto caps how much throughput through the nervous system. Like try squatting on ice. You're just going to squat almost nothing because your body's, through its wisdom, through evolution, is like, we're going to die if we fucking jump off this thing.
The splits.
Fuck.
Yeah,
exactly.
But Dr. Mike, I want my NFL running back to barbell back squat on a Bosu ball,
Yes.
so that they have better agility and that they can, you know, they have better balance when they try and get tackled.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fun, right? So you may be able to improve context-specific balance a little bit, but it's the wrong context.
Yep.
The best way to develop balance in wrestling is to have guys take shots at you and practice sprawling and hipping in, or like, you know, hopping around one leg and then doing a backflip to their back. Bosu ball shit develops a cool Bosu ball skill.
Yep.
And it will increase your overall balance if you're like 8 years old,
right,
or 65
or
and
80,
untrained,
yes, right.
If you get a lot of, the thing is, when you're practicing and playing sport, the degree of unbalancing that occurs is like 90 minutes straight of exactly sport-specific unbalancing. Man, it's hard to make an argument that any more balance training marginally is worth your time. So that already goes down the drain. But the real problem is, if I have, you know, Jamal get on a fucking Bosu ball and do a full squat with 135, my next question is, what could he do off the Bosu ball? Oh, 225. Like, okay, so how could he possibly be getting stronger if he's not even allowed to use limit weights? Mm-hmm. Okay, but he's not getting stronger. He's just getting better at Bosu ball squatting. Like, okay, but we already know that's not a limiting factor. So what the fuck are we doing?
Yes.
It's cool.
Yeah.
The other thing, to the benefit, is it doesn't fatigue you much. And it's kind of fun. And athletes sometimes lose track of what the fuck they're doing with their lives. And if they're like, oh man, like, to a lot of athletes, not all.
That was hard, and I had fun doing it.
Dope. Hard in the sense of like, it was challenging.
Yes.
But not hard.
Yeah.
315 loaded and the bars bending already in the rack, that's fucking hard.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to do that shit. Some athletes look at lifting like a checkbox. Like, if they could just check off that they lifted, good.
Set.
And they didn't really care how much the lifting is. And if the lifting is easy, then they don't get fatigued for their sport later. And then it's kind of a win-win, quote unquote, but really not much happened. So, you know, it's like a shitty analogy, but like, so you have like someone, a wife or girlfriend, someone that's important to you. And you're like, all right, we have to do sex with each other regularly for relationship health. And so if I could just get in there and just nut real quick, check. Like, but there's another person there that might need attending to, remember? Like, oh yeah, that is the point of being here. Yeah. So the point, again, back to basics, the point of being in the weight room is to challenge those primary systems of hypertrophy, strength, and power. And if we put you on a Bosu ball, none of them get trained. Mm-hmm. And so we're like, really, we're doing fuck all. So I want stable exercises, the roughly full range of motion that address the movement patterns we're trying to address, which is not fucking rocket science usually, and also that are relatively comfortable for the athlete, are not excessively injurious. Some people program like overhead snatch grip squats for their athletes. And I'm like, so like, this is a volleyball player or baseball player. They need their shoulders like low fatigue as possible, the joint. Because anyone in Olympic weightlifting will tell you that, like, oh yeah, snatch grip overhead squats, like, they're like super easy on your shoulders. To be like, what are you, nuts? Yeah, that's why I ice my shoulders before, during, and after the shit. And to be like, okay, so what's the purpose of one of those overhead squats? Like, well, really lower body strength power. Like, can't we just put the bar on the back and get the same thing? Like, okay, so don't do anything stupid that's purposefully like or purposelessly more likely to hurt or aggravate shit. And to your point earlier when we were off camera, something that is progressively loadable over time. If you do that checklist for the average S&C requirement, it's just really hard to beat barbells, man. Yeah. Dumbbells can work, kettlebells can work, in context machines can work.
Oh God, I have my athletes on that hack squat all the time.
Yeah, sure. If the goal is overall leg strength or overall leg size, hack squat away. And people say like, but hold on a second, free weights don't train you how to balance and produce force at the same time. Yeah, but that's what the fuck sport practice is for. Yep. Can you imagine taking like an ultra gifted athlete, training his legs up on the hack squat and him going out and like running routes in football and be like, whoa, like motherfucker, that's never going to happen. He's just going to have bigger, stronger legs and put the fucking pain down on other people better. So free weights versus machines. Yeah, free weights are a little bit more specific. And probably if you have a choice that you're even handed on, like high bar squats or hack squats, and the athlete's like, I don't care. What do you think, coach? You're like, probably high bar squats are a teeny bit better on average, especially as we get close to the end of the season. You want a little better transfer of sport training. There's an argument there. But overall, machines are super dope if they can meet all those other requirements. And that's kind of really what exercise selection is all about. What you'll end up if you kind of run that system of selection on exercises is rarely you will get down to one exercise. You usually get down to multiple exercises. If you want to have overall upper body pushing power, pushing strength, you got dumbbell presses, incline dumbbell presses, barbell presses, incline barbell presses, close grip, wide grip, medium grip, push-ups of various kinds, loaded push-ups, machine presses, Smith machine. There's like 15 exercises that you can use, and all of them are damn good. So just pick one or two, start easy, and slowly over time increase the load. Another thing, I don't know if you guys want to cover this, but there's something called intent to move that gets really lost in strength and conditioning sometimes.
Make sure you hit on this.
Yes. So when you're choosing movements and also when you're coaching movements, for regular gym goers and bodybuilders, the velocity of the bar just doesn't fucking matter. Just get all the reps you need, you're Gucci. But even in hypertrophy phases for athletes, you want to preserve and enhance what's called maximal intent to move. So on the eccentric phase, usually, though not always, you're going to exert a decent amount of control, be it squats, be it stiff-legged deadlifts, be it whatever. Presses, pull-ups, etc. You're going to exert a decent amount of control in the eccentric. But as you come up on the concentric, you want to accelerate the weight as much as possible because that'll train hypertrophy, but also more strength and keep your nervous system lined up for maximum power expression. So you never have to relearn that. It's okay to get away from it a little bit and come back to it more. But if I see an athlete, if I see a power lifter squatting and all their squats are pretty slow, I'm like, well, you don't get it.
Yeah, whatever.
They don't time you out. You're halfway up in the squat. It's like, you ran out of time. Like, oh, fuck. That's not a concern. But if I see a volleyball player squatting, I want her to come up quick, especially through that sticking point. Just rip that shit. And that's going to transfer to sport better than the alternative, because even when you have a hypertrophy phase and a strength phase and a power phase lined up through the months, they're playing volleyball and training volleyball that entire time. You want them to train volleyball in a body that's at least close to as good as it's going to be in the real games at the end of the season. So if you're just doing slow velocity hypertrophy training, that the girls will run slower, they'll jump less high, their arms will move slower by a little bit. That can alter technical expression and make them feel different in their bodies. Not that great. Coaches say, the girls look real tired and slow. You're like, well, it's just part of the phase, which is true. It's true, but you want that less than otherwise. Yeah. Maximum intent to move. Also, you don't want to get too complex with your instructions to athletes. So I'm huge on simplicity. So if you give them just major cornerstones of how their training should look, like don't ever fucking slack on your technique, don't ever fucking cut your range of motion, and don't ever fucking slow down the concentric. You're a machine, you're a warrior, you're a killer. Go kill. You get that inculcated in them, always good technique, always full range of motion, or to the extent the exercise is requiring, and always athletic and fast. Never have to. You can just keep saying that. And eventually every move they do in sport and in the weight room is athletic. And that's what you really want.
Yeah. The Coachemup podcast is sponsored by Squat Wedgies. Tim, what are squat wedgies?
Squat wedgies are an adjustable squat wedge, 7, 13, and 20 degrees.
It's big enough to elevate your whole foot and not just your heel.
Because it's rubber, it doesn't slide on surfaces.
It's 22 pounds, so it's durable and stable enough for even your biggest athletes.
There's a 90-day risk-free trial. The shipping is free, and
get 15% off squat wedgies with our discount code CoachEmUp15.
CoachEmUp 15 for 15% off of the best squat wedge on the planet. I just got my new watch from Amazfit. It's called the T-Rex 3. And this is the best watch I've ever had in my life.
This is a $1,000 watch. Getting it $279, which is ridiculous.
Which
value.
Is absurd. It just looks good, dude. Military grade stainless steel, AI voice control, water resistant up to 100 meters. It tracks your heart rate. It has maps.
Battery life, dude. Once every 27 days.
Yep.
That's incredible.
The selection that I have for my watch faces, my heart rate, how many steps I've taken.
The UV index.
UV index is important for your boy. I use my watch as a stopwatch all the time. As if all that wasn't good enough, you get a discount because you're listening and watching us. 15%, dude. Amazefit.com/coachemup, or you can click the link below. 15% off. The best watch on the planet. Now, back to the episode.
The intent thing I think is huge. That's where people mess up a ton.
Sure.
They're worried about like percentages and RP and all that. It's
Yes.
like, move the bar fast.
Move the bar fast. You can do RP anyway. It's really like tragic to me in a very low grade sense, not tragic at all. Sports are all a game, remember? Yeah, can you imagine like somebody, you get really ahead of yourself, you're like a superstar basketball player and aliens come down to earth. They're like, what do? You're like, I make people smile by doing this. Like, oh, you don't help society? Like you don't make food or take out the garbage? You're like, no, my whole life is a game, literally. But it's tragic in a low-key sense to see really good athletes moving submaximal concentric weights slowly. Just like, oh my God, show off a little bit. Do the thing. Train what you're training for.
Be the volleyball player that you had. What was her name? Started with a B, I think it was.
Megan.
Megan, JK. Megan.
Be her.
Yeah,
have
Megan.
your heels come up on a push press because you're riding the bar up.
That's freaking
wild. Yeah.
Mike, we did that happen fast. We're running up on time. We've got segments, as you know, from the last time you were here. We're going to get into those. We're going to tweak them a little bit, kind of on the fly here, because we don't want to ask you the same exact questions that we asked you.
Probably
last
get
time.
different answers.
Yeah, yes, very true. You want me to do the first one?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. This segment is brought to you by Squat Wedgies, the best squat wedge on the planet. Use code coachemup15 for 15% off at checkout. Mike, and we'll make it strength and conditioning specific. There's a wannabe strength coach out there somewhere listening to this. Maybe they're considering making exercise science or kinesiology their major in school, or maybe they're just a trainer. They want to be a strength coach one day. What are 3 steps they can take, or 3 things you would prioritize to help them get to a high level of strength and conditioning?
Yeah, I got 3 right offhand. One is involve yourself in athletics and try to, whatever sport you pick, try to push yourself to the limits. If recreationally you do sport, you will learn things, but your job as a strength and conditioning coach eventually is to push athletes to their absolute limits. If you don't have an intuitive understanding of what that means, you're going to have 2 problems. One is you're not going to understand what the stratosphere really looks like, and thus you're going to be bad at coaching it. The other thing is your athletes might not have as much respect or connection with you.
Totally.
I've often lifted weights pre or post practice in the same room as the athletes. And when you're like deadlifting 550 for 10 and they walk in, they're like, oh, coach ain't fucking around.
Yeah.
You're
I'll listen to him.
and grinding. They're like, well, he's going to push himself. Like, I can't just tell him like, So and you learn so much. Here's the thing. It doesn't matter how talented you are. The only real difference between you and the athletes you coach is that they're just way more talented. But if you learn how to push yourself super hard, you learn the internal dynamics of what fatigue feels like, of recovery modalities applied, of what sleep makes a difference. Living the athlete life, anyone can do. Just no one will give a shit because you'll suck. Whatever sport, whatever game, whatever hobby you pick, push yourself. If I have a strength and conditioning coach that's never pushed themselves to a high level to their ability, that person just doesn't know as much and I can't relate to them. So number 1 is do that. Number 2 is learn as much formal anatomy, physiology, sport science as you can. This is what you need. You can't do the sport for them. Also, you suck, so it wouldn't matter.
Yeah, that's right. You're the coach.
Hit me out on the field. Like, why? Like, oh yeah, no, you're right. I just get killed. So learn as much as you possibly can and always keep learning. That's a really big one. And don't ever think like, I know things, like dope, but you can always know more. And the more you learn, the better you get at guaranteeing that your services to your athletes and to the head coach are as good as they can be. Imagine, the police are called to some really tragic scene where there's a shooting in progress. Do you want those guys to be constantly on the range and sticking and moving and fucking working on flow? Or do you want one of those people to be like, oh, I haven't picked my gun in fucking 20 years. I want the fucking SWAT killers there.
100%.
So you're doing your job as your best capacity. You're going to always want to stay sharp on knowledge and build your foundation, refine, learn new things. And the third thing I would say is think about, practice, work on, and learn a ton about interpersonal relations. Because in the real world, I could write to you the science of strength and conditioning on a fucking napkin. And if you just remember that napkin, you'll be like 80% of the way there. But if you're working with human beings, motivating them, inspiring them, getting under the skin when needed, being their friend when needed, knowing when to push, when to pull, knowing how to talk to them, knowing how to ask, that is, for many people that are science inclined and in their own right pursuing athletics, not a skill set that often comes naturally. People sometimes ask, why is XYZ strength coach in charge of XYZ superstar team? But the best scientist guy I know is in charge of some fucking high school. The best people in strength and conditioning, quote unquote, the best, the people at the highest rungs, they're usually amazing people. I'm a people person. Office Space reference.
Nice.
Yelling that at people is not nice. Yelling that at people is not good.
Yeah.
You need to actually be able to relate to human beings. If you can connect with your athletes and just keep it real as fuck, and also just get them to do what you and they both agree is a good idea, you're truly on their team with them. If you can embody that mentality, it takes years of work and refinement. Also, you're going to run into different characters all the time. But there's all these gradations in between those. If you don't learn how to do them, there are many, many books and podcasts on how to socialize with humans. I'm a fucking autist, so I had to learn all this from a textbook. How to Talk to Girls, Volume 1. Look in their eyes. Hello. Introduce yourself. It's a learned skill. It's a practice skill. And it's probably the most pertinent real world skill you can have.
Yeah.
Because what do you do all day? You talk to athletes.
Yeah.
Teaching them how to move, watching their movement, that actually is maybe like 25% of the thing. It's the most indispensable part of the thing. And get you a fucking used car salesman will talk to anyone. He just know how to lift weights.
Right.
He's useless. You should give me someone who only knows to lift weights and is dog shit communicator. They're also almost pretty much useless.
Might be
Someone's
more
like,
useless.
right. Yeah. Like it just antagonizes everyone. So learn how to relate to people. And that is a fucking huge thing. It'll pay massive, massive dividends.
Yeah, I do agree. I think the biggest difference, those at the very top, are the people that can navigate the social aspect of everything, of how to communicate with coaches, players, GMs, trainers, all that kind of stuff.
Those folks learn to trust you, you're in.
Yeah, man.
And they don't learn to trust you because you're some kind of scuzzy lying motherfucker. That's not what I'm saying. People mostly learn to trust you because you're like, here's my value proposition. Here's how I can help you. I'm going to explain to you anything you want about it. And I'm also going to tell you I'm a real human being. I'm really on your side. I want our guys to win, and here's how I think we're going to do it. And if you come with me with difficulty or with controversy, I'm going to be able to be like, listen, I hear you. Let's talk through this. Let's make this right. You can mold and meld like that, and you're going to have a real good time. If you're like, nope, my way or the highway, like, dope. I hope you're really in charge, because if your coach outranks you, he's like, no, fuck off. I'm bringing in my boy. And his boy may be a dude that knows hardly nothing. They've just been friends for forever, but you can put trust in that guy. So big deal.
Totally.
Not taught in school, by the way. So you can get
it's true.
Strangely. It is in communications departments, but nobody goes over there to learn how to strengthen and conditioning coach. So a lot of people get a master's in sports science, exercise science. You'll never see a single class in most departments about how to relate to human beings. And then you get into the weight room and you can be like, oh, that's what I'm supposed to be learning in here. And that's really a true fact. Whereas if you get in the weight room, you just like cynically roll your eyes about everyone's an idiot. No one understands me. Well, dope. Like they're not going to understand you unless you learn how to communicate better.
And you're the idiot then.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, sure.
Next segment is brought to you by Plyomat, the best damn plyomat in the world. coachemup 5 at checkout.
Nice.
I like the compliment for the intro. My man. Way to get that shit.
Really good job, Zach. Yes. Rant rave. We've done this one before.
I'm no good at this segment. Let's skip.
Actually, you want to do just one or the other? Like one thing that you love? Just do rave.
You're a positive guy.
Yes.
Let's challenge you, Mike.
Yes.
What's something that you see about current S&C that you love? That you're like, I would like to see more of that.
Oh, but there's so much. It's easy to take a pessimistic view if you just look at a snapshot and you focus on the negative. So like, there's tons of fucking charlatans out there, right? Like, Mike's back in the negative again. And then, so you can get like really pissed. But it just, and I've said this before in other contexts, hopefully it's not boring people to tears. In the 1960s, most NFL football teams didn't lift weights because they believed that it would make the athletes slower and muscle bound. And the average offensive linemen weighed like 225 to 250 pounds. Can you imagine standing in an O-line at 240 and looking up against some fucking Tongan dude and you're like, how much do you, and it just takes your head off. Over time, people are embracing the compound basic lifts, the Olympic derivatives and classic power lifts. They're embracing overloading movements. They're embracing progression. They're embracing strength. And they're embracing simplicity. And they're embracing the fact that lifting hard is pretty fucking critical for sport. When basketball players make a shot or dunk, they go like this. They didn't used to do that. No. It gets a show of force. And when basketball players are more jacked, football players are more jacked, people pay attention. And there's this culture that starts in middle school, high school. High school weight room is a magical place, and it's getting more magical all the time. Because the high school weight room, they have BOSU balls. They can't afford that shit. Everyone knows what's going on. You get fucking big, we get strong, we get fast. And it just used to not be like that at all. Over time, the idea of, well, I'm skeptical about lifting went from standard to controversial to clown show. Now we're well into the phase of like, now we're just talking about details of lifting.
Yeah.
Give us another 10 years. Most coaches will be doing mostly the right shit, but some will be doing a little bit of the wrong shit. So the cynics will be like, see, this profession's fucking doomed, bro. So tons of great shit happening all the time. Tons of phenomenal coaches out there. And the world of strength and conditioning is getting better all the time. The reason we have conversations like this is for that next gen or the current gen that's open-minded to get even better still.
Hell yeah, man. Okay. If you had not, this segment is brought to you by Atlantis Strength, which you're about to absolutely crucify us on downstairs after this interview's over.
Nonsense. It's all going to be fun for me.
Yeah, fun for you. Yeah,
Right.
the trash can's directly next to it. Actually, I made note of that. Had you taken another route for your PhD, what would it have been?
I did an interview once in Nebraska for like a PhD program focused mostly on muscle myography, which is actually listening to the sounds of contracting muscles. Whoa. So instead of electromyography, it's like basically sound. Yeah, what's technically, you don't put your ear up to the quads. Hey there.
Nice.
Like that would have been cool. They didn't have the funding for me, so I never went. And also, like, I suspect I just didn't fit the bill there. But maybe something more technical, more cellular based, more molecular based would have been dope. The fact that it was the first year that ETSU program was taking students was the first year I applied.
Damn, that's crazy. The timing of it all.
Strange. Living in a simulation kind of bullshit.
Yeah.
And so I'll say this unequivocally, the East Tennessee State program had its upsides and its downsides. Most of my colleagues will know what I'm talking about, and I'll leave it there.
Sure.
But it was magical place. And I, in the literal sense and figurative sense, I became Dr. Mike there. When I arrived to ETSU, I didn't know any sports science. I knew exercise science okay, but I had all these myths and bullshit stuck in my brain. And Doc Stone managed to unplug that shit for me, mostly by yelling a lot, but it worked. And so, I can't say enough good things about the education I received at ETSU because it was the only program at the time. And now there's just only a few in the United States which have that central focus of good athletes, making them better. So many people have PhDs in exercise science and they start coaching athletes. And people are like, dude, they're doing all this wacky stuff, but they have a PhD. Like, they did not get their PhD in how to train athletes. They got their PhD in like clinical research or some bullshit like that.
Yep.
It's great stuff. More important in the grand scheme than fucking bullshit sports. But they're not in this. Like Joel Seedman, do you guys know who that is? It's by no means clear he had a single class teaching him anything about athletics. But actually, by every means clear that never happened, or he just wasn't paying attention.
Yeah. But it's also divinely inspired. You know, God told him that it's 90 degrees.
Is he saying shit like that?
Oh, yeah.
Now? Well, look, if it's from God, I better shut the fuck up.
That's right, Mike.
What do you know?
God shows up. He's like, whoa. You, shut up. I'm like, yes, sir. He's like, get on a booster ball. I'm like, yes, God. Joel, the same thing. He's like, thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not covet your neighbor's wife. Thou shalt not descend to below 90 degrees. Ever. Unless it's an eccentric, isometric. And then sometimes it's okay. When you're in a debate, you have to concede that it's often okay. And as a matter of fact, 80% of the time you do train your athletes normally. It just never makes your Instagram reel. I turn it when Joel Seedman, sorry, suspect. When Joel Seedman conversation comes up, I turn into Homelander from The Boys on Amazon. I'm just like, my face starts twitching, my eye lasers start lighting up. Motherfucker.
Do we have one more?
Yeah.
You.
Me.
That guy again.
Last was brought to you by Maze Fit. Coachemup at checkout. You can get a watch, ring,
Heart rate monitor. They basically do it all.
They do it all.
And we are among the highest redeemed codes in the entire fucking company. So thank you for everyone who apparently makes it this long in the show.
We're doing
People
shit.
watch the
all the way till the end.
I click
Supposedly.
restart. I click restart like
Allegedly.
5 times a day to get more.
You got like a Chinese robot
Yeah,
farm, like
every hour and a
thousands of
half.
them
Yeah.
watching it all the time.
Yes.
You actually lose money, but it gets you more clout.
Yes, that's
We're
which is all
top
anyone
chasers
ever
here.
cares about.
That's how the RP channel works.
Yeah.
3 million subscribers.
Yeah.
There's not that many people that give a
modeled
shit.
off
Are you
yours.
kidding me?
Yeah. So this next one, I'm just making it up right now. So have you seen the guy on like Instagram or whatever? He just has the cardboard sign. It just says a quote or something, just to random
Yes,
people walking
that
by in New
like
York.
hippie dude.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you're that guy in the middle of a gym. What would your sign say?
Strength and conditioning gym
Yeah.
for athletes coaching.
Yeah, we'll do that.
Yeah. It's just regular gym. There's all.
Yeah. A lot of shit you could do.
I'm famous and have a functioning penis. That's what the sign would say, and then it would point
That's
down.
what the sign with the arrow down to.
Yeah, but it's very far down because I'm not that tall. The girl's like, ooh,
Big sign.
but there's nothing there. Like, I'm down here. Like, oh, show me your dick. Like, well, electron microscopy is something you have to go to a lab for. So I can prove to you it's real. Quantum inference. That they've never actually detected my cock.
Yeah.
But based on like the way the spray pattern goes off the electron collider, they're like, there has to be something
Something is
there.
there.
But it's
Something is impacting the path.
it's like Planck length that can't be any shorter, violates space time. Planck length. Hey, that's a good like rap nickname. So work the basics hard. Ooh. Work the basics hard.
I like that.
And yeah, like listen, I have a PhD in the shit. Like I overthink the shit times 10. And I always come back to, oh, it actually is pretty fucking simple. So train the basics hard and you're well on your way to being 75, 80% of the way there. You don't need a whole lot of fucking super technical knowledge, super controversial shit. Get your back squat up for sets of 5. Get your stiff-legged deadlift up. Hang high pull up, Smith machine incline barbell throw, overhead heavy med ball toss, jump as high as you can with a weighted vest. You do shit like that. Over time, you're just going to be fucking better at every sport. If you just only do those movements like several times a week and progressively get stronger, take a deload, get stronger, take a deload, you never even exit the 5 rep range. It's like, fuck man, 70% of the whole fucking thing. And so it's cool to have new tricks and nuances and do kind of weird shit. Every now and again, it's awesome. Every now and again, it's marginally better, but it's just hard to beat like, do you guys know that there's like a website back in the day called 70s Big, where it's just like 70s powerlifters, just like hairy and fuck.
Oh, I do know what you're talking. Yeah.
Yeah. And they were like almost as strong as today's best lifters, just doing basic fucking shit. They were not as strong, but goddamn did they get really far. And so, yeah, fucking train the basics hard and you're going to be all right. And you're going to be able to show up in sport and do really fucking well.
Hell yeah.
I like that.
Mike, dude, thanks for
Huge
coming on
pleasure.
again.
This really gets me to scratch my itch for strength and conditioning bullshit, which Scott, the video guy who runs our YouTube channel, says is just like, we're never going to do it because it just doesn't pay his bills.
Makes no sense.
It's like, it's not going to make me any money, Mike.
You're like,
so.
shut up, Mike. Talk to a wall. So you guys are
That's
better
what
than
we're
the wall,
trying to
and that's
do.
why I'm here.
Mike, for people who don't already know where to find you, where can people find you and connect with you?
Thank you so much. Yeah, YouTube, RP Strength, YouTube, Dr. Mike. There's going to be 2 people to show up when you Google Dr. Mike on YouTube. If you do dr.mike, it might be me. If you do doctor spelled out, it'll probably be the other Dr. Mike, the real Dr. Mike. He has like 12 million on YouTube.
I didn't even know, just so you know this.
I only know you, Doc.
I had no idea that there was another Dr. Mike. You're my only Dr. Mike.
Yes,
Mike.
but more people in America can say the other way than this way.
Allegedly.
So it's very
Allegedly.
important to differentiate.
Well,
yes.
it's funny because like that other Dr. Mike is a real doctor. He's a medical doctor.
Yeah.
He's also a Russian Jew.
No
like,
fucking
he took
way,
that from
dude.
me. Because at least like if you can't be better, be different. I'm not even different.
He took that
He's
from me.
tall. he's so good looking that he was once like in one of like People magazines or some shit like that. He was like the most eligible bachelor or whatever. Dude, look at this. Your boy's not a most eligible jack shit. Like world's scariest non-bachelor. Like my wife is married to me, but she's kind of like, ugh.
That's the only reason why you're off the list.
Yeah. When guys, my wife is out in the world, like doing her doctor thing, and guys ask, are you married? She's like, who's asking? You know, because if they, you know, if they're sufficiently handsome or wealthy, she's like, oh no, I could be unmarried today.
Yeah.
And he's also a pro boxer.
Dang.
So I thought at least
Dude is a stud.
At least I could fuck him up.
Yeah.
No, false. And has more followers. He's more charming, and he has a full head of hair. It just, the list goes on and on. And so I'm really just a massively, massively second place. But that's the way I like it.
Yeah.
I was raised in last place, so for me, second place is goddamn glorious.
Hell yeah.
So yeah, if you go on there, Dr. Mike, you scroll until you see my ugly meat face. Click on something. Do not let your children watch my shit. Dude, every now and again I get a comment like, oh, I was watching this with my kids. I'm like, what the
What are you
fuck
doing?
is wrong with you?
Yeah.
I make 8 Satan jokes per episode. So, although if you think about it, Satan's not a joke. He's real and he's always here. Praise his name.
That's a good ending point right there.
Thank you for everyone who listened and watched it and made it this far through the episode. Mike, thank you again.
Guys, thanks for having me on. I love this. I could do it all day.
Hell
Let's
yeah.
go.
Later, man.
Peace.
Peace.